Imagine sleeping with one of your team members to then have your wife find out, and you end up in a very contentious divorce, losing half of your business assets and thinking, damn, I really shouldn't have done that. Well, that happens more often than most would like to think. However, if you are in the dental industry, you hear about it a lot. Today's guest is Mary Fisher Day, who's been in the industry for decades and now finds herself in the practice transition and practice valuation arena of dentistry, and the various ways she's brought in to find out the value of a practice would surprise you. It's not always on the upside during the exciting times when somebody's looking to sell. It could be when someone unexpectedly dies, someone's going through a very contentious divorce, somebody comes down with an illness or even a disability that doesn't allow them to practice anymore. These aren't the sexy and fun things that most people like to talk about within dentistry, but it is the reality of the human experience and people doing things that maybe they shouldn't do inside of dentistry or coming across some really traumatic situations. We kind of summed it up at the end of the episode, which is don't be an idiot and don't do dumb shit, and also prepare yourself in case the unexpected happens. We hear time and time again dentists dying young from traumatic incidences or even taking their own lives, and they're not prepared because they expect to be working and practicing for a long time and leaving their families in a whole lot of financial ruin or stress unnecessarily because a little bit of preparation wasn't done ahead of time. We talk about that in today's episode. It's something that you definitely want to listen to. It's, again, not fun or sexy, but definitely important. Here we go. Mary Fisher Day, welcome to the Real Talk of Dental. I have been dying to have this conversation with you. We met, oh my gosh, I think probably 3 years ago at this point at Dental Entrepreneur Women, created by our dear friend Ann Duffy. So I met you through that magical world of marvelous women. And you have been in the dental industry for a very long time. And you have a world of knowledge, a world of experience, and also probably an entire book series of stories that you can tell from the dental industry. And currently, you help doctors with practice transitions and purchases and things like that. So welcome. And I just want to dive in. First question. One of the things we were just talking about is doctors taking advice from other doctors on what they should do with their practices. What's up with that?
If you come up from it in a realistic way, they're thinking, well, this person's been there, done that. But what they don't know is if it's been successful. And I'm thinking, how about talk to somebody who's actually been successful at it? Somebody who's maybe been a practice management consultant who has been successful at that as well. And putting it out there and assuming one person or two people are going to give you the advice you need because it worked for them or they feel like it worked for them or they want to pretend it worked for them because I've seen all three happen and it didn't. I want them to be careful. They went through school, they've got probably had student loans, and they've worked really hard to get where they are. Be careful where you get advice from.
That's a big one. And I do see a lot of that also where there's almost this, like, dare I say, snobbery in the industry when it comes to where people are willing to get advice from. And they often want it to be from people who have, like you said, they've been in their exact shoes, right? And I've seen a lot of chatter online too, where it's like, don't take advice from anybody that's never worked a day in a practice and things like that. And I get it. I get where they're coming from, but I also get where, like you're saying, if you are a practice management consultant or you're somebody that specializes in practice transitions, you've also seen hundreds and hundreds of these offices or transactions. So you're able to take a lot of experience and wisdom from all of that versus somebody who's had 30 years experience in one container.
Yeah, I've seen it all. I've seen a lot. I think you're right there. I was thinking, I know of at least two dentists who are out on the speaking circuit right now who have had failed practices, multiple failed practices in their speaking. they're writing books, and people are taking advice from them, and it kills me. I keep my mouth shut. I don't say anything, but just be careful who you're getting your advice from. If you're really gonna take advice from somebody, if you like, "I like that advice," I want check them out. Run a truth finder background on them or something. Find out if they've had before you take it from somebody who's only done once. I'm serious about that because it can cost someone who's had hundred thousands of dollars in student loans buying a practice and paying hundreds of thousands of dollars. It could cost them everything
Mhm.
by taking the wrong advice.
Yeah.
I'll leave that subject at that. But I do completely believe that doctors, they want advice and they want it from somebody who's been there. Just be careful where you get it from.
Yeah, that is a good suggestion. And I even see a lot of it on some of those Facebook groups and stuff like that too, where they're just really seeking out advice from other doctors. And I think it's helpful for sure to get a collective wisdom or some collective feedback. But like you're saying, you really need to practice discretion and not assume that what happened for them is going to happen for you, and or they could be lying about their success, which is also very, very common.
They could have a completely different practice philosophy than you,
Mhm.
a different standard of care, focus on different treatments. There's no way your staff and their staff are gonna be exactly the same. There's no 2 practices that are identical in everything. So keep that in mind too.
Mhm.
It's just that it doesn't happen. I've never seen 2 practices that are identical, ever.
Right. Yeah, that's a big one.
Even if they're owned by the same people and they're in different locations, they're different. 'Cause different employees, different patients, everything.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Hey, I just want to pop in on today's episode and talk to you about this new GPT I wrote called Boundary Boss GPT. And it's for those moments where you've said yes to something and immediately felt that pit in your stomach, or maybe you've now written 5 drafts of an email because you're trying not to sound mean, even though you're exhausted and you swear you've said this thing so many times to the same person, or you're kind of sick and tired of staying late, taking it on, smoothing things over, and wonder why you're the one that's always burning out. A lot of the conversations that I have on this podcast, we often hear about people hitting these walls of burnout and oftentimes not even knowing what to say. So that's why I built Boundary Boss GPT. It's kind of like having me in your pocket when you're about to respond to a text, email, or team issue, and you just don't know what to say because your people pleasing brain is completely hijacking you. This is going to help you have clarity, confidence, and self respect without the guilt, over explaining, or the drama. Go ahead and grab it in the show notes below. It's totally free and you're going to love it. Okay, now back to this awesome conversation. Something you also wanted to talk about today was some of the promiscuity that happens within dental offices and people perhaps being a little more exploratory in their sexual endeavors when it comes to the workplace. So, what are your thoughts on doctors and team members sleeping together?
I think it's a horrible idea.
Okay.
I think it's a horrible I actually know it is,
Mhm.
and I know that it rarely ends up good. There's gonna be relationships ruined on both sides or at least one side, maybe marriages, children involved, and a lot of money is going out the door for that. I've seen that happen in practices as well. A divorce costs a lot of money, and you cheat on your spouse and you own a practice, you'll pay for it.
Mm.
You will pay for it. So just be careful, with that, and then also think about if you're the dentist, I mean, this is for team members too. You're not gonna win, team member. That you're just not gonna win on this one, okay? Rarely will you win. You're gonna destroy something and could be your own life. But yeah, just be careful about that. I see it happen way too much.
Mhm.
I just happened here in my hometown where I live right now, 2 dentists I know, but I've seen it throughout my life. And when I worked as a practice management consultant for over 20 years, one of the things I would say to my male clients, especially male clients, because, people are people, You're surrounded by beautiful women. You're having an argument with your wife at home over something. Think about this. Think about the scenario. These pretty women are wanting to, or being flirty or whatever. I'm sure it would be easy to take someone up on that, but don't. It'll cost you in the long run. Go somewhere else other than your office. That's just not the place to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the industry for a while as well, and I countless affairs and inside the offices for sure. Very, very common. And yeah, it ends up costing an enormous amount of money. I don't think, and I mean, in addition to like the feelings and the families that are broken and the emotional and mental and spiritual impact of that decision for sure. But a lot of times people don't think about one of the most detrimental things you can do to your business is have an affair and get a divorce. You don't think about that. There's a lot of people in the dental space that are super competitive, wanting to be, really productive, have the best business, do this, do that, reading all the books on leadership and how to crush it and how to get their ROIs and get their KPIs up and all of those types of things. But you start getting a little messy with your behavior, that'll wipe you out in no time.
It will. And I know you've seen it too. And now on the other end, in practice transitions,
Mm.
you can imagine what I see. And providing practice valuations too. I've done those for practices that are where it's being evaluated because of a divorce.
Mhm.
And the doctor's not selling, but somebody's about to get half.
Right.
So, yeah. So it's difficult for those situations, I know, but I just wanted to think twice. Think twice because the student loans are gonna add up to nothing after compared to what you're gonna pay
Yeah.
if you do.
Yeah.
Female practice owners have been known to do it too. I'm not saying that it's just men because it's not. Just be careful out there.
Yeah, because you're in the practice valuation business, so you're being brought in under all kinds of situations, and
Yeah,
yeah, like you're being brought in for divorces and anytime the practice needs to get a price tag put on it, right? And it's not always because
right.
of something good and positive and exciting happening.
No, it's not, and it's not always for estate planning, which I think is important.
Mm.
I think, for emergency exit planning, I think having a practice valuation is important. There's a lot of reasons to have it, but the ones I dislike doing the most are the ones for
Mhm.
divorce, you know?
Yeah.
But it happens, and I do my best to be fair, and yeah,
Yeah, I know, it's gotta be yeah, you're being pulled in during some tricky situations for sure.
yeah, yeah, I am.
Yeah. What are some other situations that you see that really get offices in some jams, whether, I don't know, financially, emotionally?
Oh, man. Okay, let's start with treat how you treat your team.
Mhm.
Patients pick up on it. If there's stress between the doctor and the team in the operatory, at the front desk, anywhere, patients pick up on it and they don't appreciate it, I've heard from a lot of patients that have witnessed that are friends or family members or something. Like, I don't think my doctor likes his assistant, or something like that. And I'm like, yeah, so just be careful about that, how you treat your team. Everybody picks up on it, okay? And it's not good for staff morale, it's not good for your practice culture, and it's not gonna make your practice more successful. But so if you've got a team member that you do not like and you're the practice owner, fire them. Let them get a job somewhere else where somebody will appreciate them, and you find somebody you will appreciate. Second, I don't think a practice owner should ever have to drive up in the morning to work and see that one of their employees' cars there and get a stomach ache. I've had clients actually tell me that. They said, every time I drive up and I see her car there, I get a stomach ache. I'm like, you own this business. There's no excuse. We'll find somebody else. You don't, you can't be productive that way. And your patients are going to pick up on it again. So I think that's important. I think that team members that stay around too long that are the bad apple, that are poison to the rest of the team is also bad for a team. Don't keep those employees just because you feel like, you're gonna have to pay something unemployment. You pay unemployment insurance for that reason. So, those are some things I see practices do that's just so unhealthy, and it does cost them money and time
Yeah, it's really
and
interesting, like, especially I've noticed in dental where offices will hang on to team members for a really long time, even if they're not good fits. Like all of the things that you described, like I've seen and heard that too. And there's this fear that somehow they're letting them down or they're hurting them or they won't be able to find anybody else. They don't really see the upside of it. And like you said, this person can go find employment elsewhere and be successful somewhere else or not. But like their future, their career isn't necessarily your responsibility, right? Like they're responsible for that.
right.
Why do you think doctors or managers put up with that? Why do they keep toxic team members on for so long?
Well, I know they tell me why they do, and there is data to back it up that it costs a lot of money to replace an
Mhm.
employee. Okay, there's data that backs that up. That's a lot of it. They're afraid they won't find anyone better, and they don't like having turnover. There's all kinds of reasons like that. They don't like confrontation or conflict. So there's a lot of reasons they do it. And one of the doctor I was thinking about who said he got a stomach ache every morning when he saw her car there, I'm like, and that's it. He didn't want conflict. He didn't want confrontation. But yet he couldn't stand working with this person. So I think there's a lot of reasons. There's also the situation where there's alcohol involved in the practices. So don't abuse your employees either. The doctor in Tennessee who duct taped the phone to his office manager's head because she refused to call and cancel his afternoon appointments for the 3rd day in a row so he could go to the golf course. This really happened, and he was drinking too, and he got arrested on the golf course, but he literally duct taped the phone to her head.
When did this
Er,
happen?
Not funny. It was in early 2000s.
OMG.
Yeah, it was early 2000s, maybe even late 90s, early 2000s. Because I first heard this story from somebody who witnessed it when I was in an office in Tennessee. So, anyway,
Hmm.
things like that are just crazy stories, but they happen, and, this guy ended up going to rehab and everything, and I don't know if he ever practiced again for sure, but that poor girl, what do I do? She's calling her friend who's an office manager in another office, and luckily it was lunchtime because, she was supposed to be calling the patients to cancel the afternoon, and her friend went over there and
Oh my
called the
gosh.
police. Not funny, but you think about things, you can't make that up.
No.
You can't make who would ever think to make something like that?
Yeah.
And there are so that on another subject, if you've got a little bit of a temper, and I've seen that, I don't know if you've seen that or not, where doctors have tempers and throw
Oh,
things
yeah.
or push their assistant or stuff. And
Mhm.
it's still happening now. I can't believe it's still happening, but it is. Get some help, and that's what I've told them. The next to the last doctor I ever did practice management with, he shoved his assistant because he didn't like the way she was trying to take the alginate impression out, and he shoved her over the patient.
Oh my goodness.
So think I mean, just get some help, dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the throwing of instruments used to happen more back, like, when I was first getting out of school and everything, but it still happens is what I'm hearing out there. So there's all kinds of things that can ruin your practice. Having an alcohol problem, having an affair, throwing instruments, being mean to your team members, keeping team members that you can't stand working with, keeping team members that are poison to your entire team. All of those things can hurt your practice outside of lack of production and patient butts in the seat. All of those things have nothing to do with the patients in the chair.
Mhm.
They're things that are controlled by the doctor, really.
Yeah, it's kind of for whatever reason, hearing you talk about this has this analogy in my head, but it's kind of like living somewhere and you're like protecting your house from, say, a giant storm like a hurricane coming through, and that's what you're focusing on. But meanwhile, you have a crack in your foundation and there's a slow leak coming in the whole time, and all of a and your
Yeah,
entire basement and foundation gets destroyed. Meanwhile, you've had your eye on focusing on preparing for this
yes.
giant storm. And I think that's kind of what you're pointing to, where a lot of doctors and owners are always focusing on like the big catastrophic stuff that people talk about and making sure there's like certain insurance and things like that. But sometimes it's happening at like the basic foundation level where it's like super, like a crack, right? And those are the things that could take you out really quickly because,
Yeah, they can.
yeah, like if you have a really toxic team member, something I point out and talk about too is like, hey, this is actually a liability because they could be prepping for a lawsuit. And yeah, maybe like you have more financial means than they do, and you might be able to win in the end, and it could be a blip on the radar and things like that. But is it something you want to deal with? Is it money you want to spend? Is it a knock on your record that you want, for your office? Is this
No.
something that you want the team to be exposed to? And then people start to see, because I also knew in office that there were all kinds of lawsuits being threatened. And this doctor just had almost a common practice of just paying people off. It was crazy because he was
Employees?
unhealthy, you know?
Oh, yeah,
And he had a lot
yeah.
of money, so he was fine just paying people off all the time, but his culture was just completely destroyed as a result, and people
Yeah,
got to see like, "Oh, well, if I threaten him, I'll get a nice little payout." And he was just
yeah,
right and left, and he was sleeping
yeah,
with some team members, and people knew that, so all of
yeah,
them had that in their back pocket, the card to use. So things like that, or the maybe team member that maybe you feel attracted to, and intuitively you're like, it's probably unsafe for me to have this person on here. I mean, it sounds terrible, and probably HR for Health would have my head on a platter right now. I don't know how they would handle the situation. But if you have to make sure that you're taking care of the foundation of the business and it's not dying by like, a bunch of cracks in the foundation.
yeah. There's something to be said for self-control too,
Mhm.
but I also know that, you know, we're all human, okay? We all make mistakes, and I'm not saying I haven't made mistakes. I've made plenty of mistakes in my life, but, I mean, figure that out on the interview and don't hire them, maybe.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm too attracted to you. I can't hire you.
No, well, I probably wouldn't say that. That would be a bad
Yeah, yeah, the
can
HR
you
people are
imagine?
rolling over right now.
No. I know they are, Cara Kelly, I hope you don't watch this.
I know. We're probably gonna be on their hot takes.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's so many things that doctors can do outside practice owners can do outside of, the scheduling everything to ruin their practice, but there's so many things that they can do right. Surround yourself with people you enjoy working with, talented, smart, people that respect you and who you are treat them with respect. Treat if you can't treat them with respect, they shouldn't work for
Mhm.
you. You should not have them in your office. Culture, it's not going away. Practice culture, people don't like the words often, but it's not going anywhere. It matters.
Mhm.
And I think that on the end I'm at now, doing practice transitions and all of that, I know that practice culture ends up mattering in your valuation because it shows in your numbers. It ends up mattering when you sell your practice because any buyer wants to know about your team and the culture, and you've got just take care of all of it and don't do crazy things.
And I think it's good to note, like you had said earlier, to get some help, or even if you're a team member and you're recognizing that, hey, maybe your doc needs some help, finding some resources to get them what they need, or maybe make a suggestion of, hey, I really thought you were doing great when you were working with such and such coach, or hey, I heard about this advisor, maybe they can help, or maybe even having a candid conversation with them, just letting them know that you're concerned about their overall well-being. I had Dr. Brett Kessler on, a while back, and he was talking about a lot of the mental health stuff and addiction stuff and
Yeah.
some of the resources at the ADA. But I had asked him too, because a lot of docs are afraid to get help because they don't want to get in trouble, right? They don't want to have their license
Right,
revoked, and yeah, that
right.
could dramatically hurt their livelihood. And the way, that's handled these days is still very, people have their thoughts on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, he had suggested as a team member, if you see, your doc or owner struggling, just going up to them and saying, "Hey, I've been really concerned." And letting them know that you have that concern and some of the behaviors that you've seen, and see if you can, maybe get family involved or something like that to support. But yeah, I think sometimes just speaking up before it results in something that turns into something much worse later, for sure.
Well, and that's a good point, Brandy, because going back to talking about the behaviors like the anger issues and the having an affair, there's always something under that and behind that
Mhm.
that's causing that, right? So, and that's one way of people handling their unhappiness in some situation. Like drinking alcohol is another one, and abusing drugs. There's a lot of things like that are done, but there is help out there. There's no need for these docs to kill themselves. That's really been bothering me a lot and a lot of other people too. And I'm sure that's what Dr. Kessler was referring to is and he probably I see a lot of it and I get calls when doctors die because, I work in that space of helping with practices. And because I do emergency exit strategies, somehow I've become known for where people call me for the office to talk to when a doctor has died you know,
Mhm.
with nothing in place. So it's just get help before you lose everything, and losing your life is the ultimate. It's not worth it.
Yeah, for sure. Mary, what's included in like an emergency exit plan? Like just for the listeners would be.
Oh, that's a good
Mhm.
question. Well, for one thing, I have a document that I've created that makes it's downloadable and fillable, and I'm happy to help anybody with it too, or help their office manager and whoever put it all together. But it basically makes it so that no matter whether you're living or not, you still have control over the transition of your practice. I make sure that they have everything they need together so they can control how their practice transitions. If they're in a bicycle accident and are, they're alive, but they can't make decisions for themselves for a while, it's in there. We know what they've written. The practice can sell, and if they rehab later and can work, then go associate somewhere or start a new one or a partner. There's other things, but the longer a practice sits when a doctor dies or becomes disabled, the less the value is. Within 2, 3 months, I call them the vultures are in there trying to pick it apart.
Mhm.
So what's involved in a emergency exit planning strategy that I help doctors with is that document, and then I talk to them through the things they need to make sure they have together, things they need to think about, what they need to write down, and that it's like having a life insurance policy for your practice as well, one that your family benefits from and one that you can control how the practice transitions. It also prevents the family members who are mourning from having to make all kinds of really hard decisions immediately.
Mm.
And it helps the team members who will inevitably be called in to deal with all of that, pull the reports, handle that, and be in there working to sell the practice that they're working in and not knowing if they're going to have a job or not. So I've seen all those situations. It's just so helpful to have an emergency exit plan, which I do recommend that you have a practice valuation as well. When you have a baseline, just a baseline valuation, and then it can be updated every few years. You don't have to do it every year.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, that's super helpful. And so would death or becoming disabled, are those like the two qualifiers for an emergency exit strategy, or is there anything else that would in the
No,
front?
uh, well, the emerg it could also be just an exit strategy. A lot of people have valuations and these documents put together as in estate planning as
Mhm.
well. It's an emergency directive is what I call it too, because I want the attention to it for that reason, but it can also be an estate planning tool. And I've had lots of doctors have estate planning valuations and directive, but it's still can be used for emergency or estate planning. It's the same
Yeah.
thing. If they die soon, it's you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
It's still the same thing. It's just another way of saying it.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet a lot of people don't think about that.
No, and it's not fun to think about any more than it is fun of thinking about having to have a life insurance policy or anything and all the reasons you have to have it. It's not fun to think about it. A lot of times it's the spouses who think about it and who'll be like, "What happens? I know nothing about that practice. I don't know where anything is. How do I do it?" Even if you have professionals surrounding you, a consultant, and you have relationships with your supply companies and everything, even if you have those things, it's still gonna take a while to gather all the documents. I have friends who were in practice transitions, and their dad died a couple of years ago in a car accident on the weekend of 4th of July, and he's a owned up dental practice, and, he hadn't prepared, but and they know everything to go in and get and it still took a while, and it was still a battle because it wasn't together. It wasn't. You have to still get it together and get a value and everything.
Yeah, and it's not
So
something to think about just when you get old either, because you're reminding me of a story I just, heard a few months ago where a doctor was pretty young. He was in his 40s and he passed away suddenly. He ended his life and it was completely unexpected. He had just been on vacation with his wife, the weekend before. She said they were having an amazing time. The family was completely blindsided by it. And the wife was just completely distraught over the entire thing. So I believe his brother was the executor and he just put the practice on the market. They just wanted to sell it. They just wanted to be done with it. And I think they were taking a pretty bare minimum, offer for it because they were just so traumatized by everything and they just wanted to move on with stuff. But it was a huge ordeal with the family and incredibly stressful. And I mean, gosh, I know just from with my dad passing away a few years ago, I mean, it's peanuts, from a paperwork perspective with that. But anytime you experience a loss, you're not thinking clearly, like, in the moment. You
no.
think you are. Like, I thought I was
Yep.
thinking clearly, you know, but I wasn't because our brains do some funny things to, help us out and to cope. And so you think you're thinking clearly and you think you're making the right decisions, but I swear to God, I was misreading forms all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just because when you're mourning, oh, I can't imagine being put in that p situation. I got the call for a doctor murder-suicide
Mhm.
recently to advise on that and how th I mean, certainly that was unexpected, the dentist was murdered, and, everybody's, "What do you do in that situation?" And it's there was nothing
Yeah.
prepared,
Yeah.
and they had 2 kids, somebody's gotta take care of them. So, yeah, you don't know, and then the doctors that were in the airplane crash, which is the whole reason I started this. In 2016, there were 3 couples that left, Serona World, Dance by Serona World meeting, and they were flying home. One of the doctors was a pilot, and there were 4 dentists in those. There's 6 people, 3 couples, and 4 of them were dentists. Amongst them, they owned 7 dental practices, 7 dental practices, because one doctor owned multiple practices, and they had 11
Mhm.
children between the 3 couples. And the plane crashed, and they were all lost, and they were in their late 30s, early 40s. So, God, I can't believe that's been 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's what made me really start going down this hill because nothing was I saw GoFundMe be put up to take care of the children because no one had access to the funds. No one had access to get to the funds to take care of some of those children, and it's just hard. So you don't wanna be that way. You don't want your children being passed around from friends to friends until somebody can take them, you know, and GoFundMe set up. You didn't work your whole life for this. Just fill out the dang document, have a practice valuation, and be prepared so that your family's taken care of and don't have to deal with this situation should you die unexpectedly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good advice, and yeah, I mean, it's not the happiest of topics, but I think
It's not at all where I thought we were going today. Me either,
no, but
but
it's
it's
so
still I
important.
feel
It's so important.
passionate about it.
Yeah.
Those children are 10 years older now than they were then,
Mhm.
when they all lost all of their parents, you know? Both
Yeah.
parents. And it makes me wanna cry still thinking about it, and I do know that, I do know how the practices ended up and what ended up happening with them, but, luckily, they had some friends that came together and that were dentists that they went to dental school with, they were still friends with, that came and helped keep the doors open while they tried to, get things sold, but it was really hard. Only, the forensics and then the lawsuits because of the plane and then, just losing both your parents and not knowing where you're gonna live and just make those plans. Emergency exit strategy, you get to write your wishes in that document too about how you want everything done, who you want to handle your practice for you. And of course, you want to talk about anything else they need to take care of for you.
And I think the fact that it's not the most glamorous of topics is why a lot of people avoid it, like you said, but it's so important. And these are the types of things that people just tend to brush over. So, I mean, whether it's from thinking about sleeping with one of your employees or, thinking about leaving your spouse because you're bored or, thinking about you living until you're 80 and practicing, and selling off and riding off into the
Yeah.
sunset. Life doesn't always go according to plan. And sometimes it's those things that can have such a catastrophic effect that nobody prepares for. And one of my colleagues and friends, like, he always talks about having proper insurance. I mean, medical debt, I think, is one of the
Yes.
biggest, the number one, maybe, I think, form of debt for people in the US.
Oh, yeah.
Unexpected medical debt. No
Yes.
one thinks catastrophic things are going to happen to them medically, so having insurance, yeah, it might be a pain in the butt, it might be an expense you might not want, or going through the paperwork of, emergency exit planning, might not think it needs to apply, but better to be safe than sorry, I suppose.
Yeah, and I always offer to help
You do.
people with that if they need help with those documents. I guess if there's been a theme to this talk, it's more like how to protect the years you spent in college and the amount of money you spent building or buying a practice and the easy ways to there these aren't the hardest things to do in the
No.
world.
Yeah.
It's not. You've done harder by buying a practice, paying for dental school, getting through dental school. You've done much harder than these things. And every one of these things we've talked about could help save their practice by making the right decision.
Yeah. I think we can sum it up too by just saying, don't be an idiot.
I love that. Yeah. Act like you care. That's
Act
another
like you
thing. Act
care.
like you care. If you don't care, nobody else is going to care.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
That's awesome. We should get some t-shirts made that say, I'm acting like I care.
I know. Oh, I should have one that says act like you care.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
No, I like that. Yeah. Acting like I care.
And then the back will say, because I don't.
Yeah, no, right.
Um,
No, I really hope that somebody who needs to hear these things listens to it and takes some of the advice.
for sure. Well, Mary, thank you so much for being on. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you. And I know you have many more stories to tell. So we'll have to have you on again so to hear more from you because you're awesome. So thanks for being on.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You just listened to the real talk of dental. If it hit, if it stung, if it made you feel just a little more human, good. That's the point. This isn't about fixing practices, it's about healing people. And if you're brave enough to show up real in this industry, you're my kind of leader. Subscribe, call in, send your wildest workplace confession. And most importantly, don't clean up for anyone. The mess, that's where the magic lives. We'll see you again on the next episode.